This is Martin Fournier-Giguère, aka DrGiggy for BlueFirePoker.com, and this is a video of 5 tables plus a replayer of NL200 6 max on full-tilt poker. A lot of you guys have been asking me to make a lot more of those live videos with a lot of tables and a lot of action, so here it is. I think this is a good one. It's a 2-part. Lasts for about an hour 40, the whole session. So enjoy. Happy New Year, guys, friends, everyone. Jiggy on the mic for 5 tables plus a replayer of 1-2 no limit full tilt poker Hold'em Texas. I have been playing for about 20 minutes now, trying to get reads and get back in the vibe, because I kind of haven't played for about a month or so. So hopefully I won't be too rusty. So far it's been going pretty well. So far so good. I've made a couple of buy-ins, being a bit lucky. And yeah, that's pretty much it. There's no particular theme to that video. It's basically going to be a bit about talking about coming back after a break, because yeah, like I said, I haven't been playing for a month or so. And other random thoughts that pop in my head between interesting hands of non-stop action at 1-2 here. So yep, I don't know much of these players. I'm trying to get to know them, so they become my friends. So it's pretty much readless, so it's gonna be about getting reads as well, of course. And not much dynamic. I was starting to get some dynamic with one of the guys, but he just insta quit when I stacked him when I hit my draw on the turn. So I guess he was kind of tilted. Did I 3-bet that? I think I did. I hope I did. Otherwise it doesn't make any sense. This is awkward. I think I can get called by worse from time to time if the guy knows me. He has kind of a regular name, so that's pretty much it as far as reads go. He's probably gonna call with a worse ace, although there aren't many of those. I don't like checking that much, because if he bets, I'm kind of screwed, and he can turn a lot of things into a bluff for sure. Yep, so that worked out well. He ended up calling with 9, so he probably knows who I am. I decided to give up there for no particular reason, just didn't feel like it. So yeah, I was kind of playing under the assumption that he knows who I am. I think this is going to be very thin if you're in a normal dynamic of tight players. But like I said, the bet is it is thin for sure, but checking just totally sucks for what it's worth. If I check, he can turn, like I said, a lot of things into bluffs, and I won't be able to call with much. I just will be less. It's probably a check fold, but I definitely prefer a bet fold to a check fold there. So that ended up working well. So I'll definitely take a mental note on that guy. That looks like he is going to play back at me, and he knows who I am and stuff. My general vibe so far about the game is that I'm kind of a target. I'm not sure if it's just random variance that guys have been getting hands against me, but it definitely feels like I am getting 4-bet a lot, and all this stuff. So I flop a set here against a total net. I've never seen that guy before, but I can see he's really tight. I'm definitely going to bet big. I don't expect him to value bet too thin or try big bluffs just because of his stats. If I do anything else than bet, so I'm pretty much going to pot every street and hope that he has ace king or something like that. Now this is this is ridiculous, seriously. I'm running absurdly well, so he's obviously not folding an ace, and he has an ace 100% of the time. So I should maybe gigantic pot. This is just ridiculous. He did have ace 10, but yeah, even if the queen doesn't come on the river, I think I had done a pretty good job of building a pot. I mean, I don't have any read on the guy, but I do have 58 hands, and he's playing 7-3. So I expect that type of guy to pot control if I check at any point in that hand. That would definitely be a good spot for me from time to time if I'm against an aggressive player, to kind of check and let him represent ace queen in a deep pot if I know he's the type of guy who would try to make me fold ace king, because he's going to be able to represent ace queen quite a lot in that pre-flop situation. But against that guy, it's definitely out of question, and potting every street, even though I definitely won't be balanced here in my potting of every street. I really don't mind. I just want to maximize my value. So that worked out pretty well. If the river comes like brick, like a 4, I'm probably not shoving. He might fold. I did not expect to see him turn over ace 10 here. I was expecting something more like ace king and maybe ace jack suited. I don't know if he's playing like he was playing 8-7-3 and then he decided to cold call ace 10. I would have bet something more along the lines of like 240 or something like that, so he never folds an ace, because he couldn't make some big folds if I just shove. I'm gonna call here. I don't have a clue about that guy once again. I'm gonna try to get some reads in the beginning, but yeah, that's just ridiculous. As soon as he calls the flop, he's very likely to have an ace. So when I decide to bet big on the flop, it's like I get my answer right away, whether he has an ace or not. And when I do know he has one, I definitely want to bet big, and you don't want to be scared of like scaring him, basically. Not that type of guy. You have to assume that he's kind of brain dead. So that's the way I approach the thinking process there. One note about something I wanted to talk about. I'm playing like a 1-2 here, and I haven't played those stakes in a while, of course, but I did want to talk a bit about balance here. I mentioned something during the hand about balance. I think 1-2 NL200 is going to be one of the stakes where I absolutely pretty much don't care about being balanced or not, from what I can remember from these stakes. The fact is, most of the regulars that are still at 1-2 or that are moving up and that are playing this level are there for a reason, and that reason is mostly going to be that they have leads, and you definitely want to concentrate a lot more on trying to find the other players' leaks than trying to be balanced and not giving up tails and stuff like that. I think most players at these levels, I mean, I'm not being rude or anything, but this is a horrible card. I was probably planning on check calling down on a break. but that gives pretty much everything that was a straight draw on the turn, which is a lot of things that he's going to barrel, at least a pair of kings, and he's definitely betting those now. So, and he did have king deuce and did not bet, which is kind of weird at the same time. I was not calling, so yeah, good read on his part on reading the board and stuff. But otherwise, I think I would have called pretty much any river. But yeah, coming back on what I was saying, people probably will have a hard time adjusting if you attack their leagues most of the time at these levels. I mean, I myself, like when I say I'm not being rude or whatever to players at these levels, I myself have a lot of leagues, and when I go play, I don't know, 10, 20, and 25, 50, and I run into the very best regs, and they start attacking those leagues, I definitely have a hard time playing back. It's going to be very tough for me. And from time to time, I know these guys, if I go play 25, 50, and I run into the best reeler at this limit, and he keeps pounding on me in certain spots, he's probably not balanced at all until he figures out that I'm understanding what he's doing. So you can basically get a read on the players that want you, and as soon as you get a read, you have to get a read as soon as possible, because a lot of money that you're going to make there against the regs is about exploiting the leaks, and it's about getting the reads first. If you don't have any reads, it's going to be totally useless. But as soon as you get those reads, like I said, you want to pound on them as much as you can without ever thinking about being balanced, because I don't think anyone will exploit that unless they show you that they will, basically. You have to assume that you're not being exploited until proven the contrary. And that's one thing that you have to still keep in mind, some things about balance, but balance is something that, especially at these limits, is way, way, way overvalued by most of the guys, and I think it's much, much more important to try to find other players' leaks and exploit them than try to be balanced yourself. I'm gonna have a lot of unbalances when I'm playing those stakes. If I will be playing hands that, if I was playing against someone who's a great hand reader, a great like 25-50 reg, they would know right away what I have. But I will play those hands because I think that those regulars won't be able to, in these particular spots, won't be able to hand read me perfectly like someone else would do. So don't be afraid to mix your lines and to do stuff that might seem obvious to you from time to time, but if you can get a good enough grasp of your opponent's thinking level, you realize that it might not be obvious to them, basically. So yeah, that was my random thought. I'll try to come back on that later. Here I have no clue who's that guy. He leads into me on the turn. He's playing a very, very loose pre-flop. Definitely tends to make me believe that he's just terrible. And he leads pretty weak on the turn. I think he's gonna like randomly lead fold on the turn quite a lot there. Looks like kind of a defensive random bet. But here he calls and then he leads again on the river, and there aren't that many draws that I've missed. For what it's worth, I have a pretty hard time putting him a hand here, but by experience I don't think he's going to fold very often if I shove. I think he's going to show up with like a random ace that he check called flop with for some reason, maybe ace 3 or ace 4, and now he's probably not folding it just because he has an ace and he's dumb and he's invested too much. So I'm still confident in my stab on the turn. I made it just big enough so that he's going to fold, I don't know, 10x that is randomly leading from time to time. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Here I decided to check the flop because this is definitely the kind of flop where I don't want to check raise and there are a lot of draws and stuff. Oh, sorry. I don't want to get check raise, sorry, on that jack deuce hand. Once again, not much read against that guy. Other that he's more than full stack and he's on only one table and he's playing 18-16 so far, so he's likely to be a railer. Here I'm just going to give up. Tough to represent a 10 when I bet, and tough to represent anything, and I have no equity. Certainly not a good multi-barrel spot. But yeah, coming back on the jack deuce, this I don't think, without any historic against someone, this is not a type of board where I want to go ahead and bet like 3 streets for value. I might do it against some players against who I have much more historic, but not against that guy, and I definitely prefer trying to value on turn and river because this will keep the pot smaller, and my hand is very fragile even if I'm ahead, and if I start betting the flop, I might be value betting myself, and I do give him a chance to bluff. Turn is a queen. I'm not stoked about calling that, but I could have raised, actually, now that I'm thinking back on it. I could have raised pretty big on the turn and then tried to present ace-king by putting a slight overbet on the river or something like that. But I ended up calling because I first thought was that my jack was good often enough. With the diamond falling now and him betting, raising is pretty tough because it's going to be tough for me to represent a flush, and I'm not raising anything else basically at this point in the hand. And I feel like he has something like king queen a lot, which I might have been able to make him fold if I had raised the turn, if I had thought of that play right before. With his sizing on turn plus river, I think he has something like king queen or ace queen quite a lot, which would match the pre-flop action as well. But yeah, I definitely can't raise that river unless I would have some kind of historic against someone, and I can't call either. I don't think I'm good pretty much ever. I could be wrong, but it's my feeling against that guy. So that is definitely one thing that I want to try and keep concentrating. It's going to be quite tough because I'm making a video here and I'm thinking about a lot of things, but when I'm coming back from break, I do want to be able to look at all of my options when I'm playing a hand, and I want to be a lot more aware of that and cautious of that than if I had been playing for, I don't know, for a while now and I was in a grinding mode. You tend to like forget some lines and just don't think about plays and stuff when you're kind of rusty. So I do want to take my time, and when I haven't been playing for a while, I definitely am not going to come back my first session and like start at 12 or 15 tabling, which is my normal amount of tables. I definitely want to cut down on the tables just to get my groove back, and if your normal amount of tables is, oh, that sucks. Oh, I run so bad. 10. Oh, and I'm wasting hearts too. A bit that I think I do have some value here, and I do have the ace of clubs. If you raise, I could have shoved over as a bluff, but that would be suicide. But yeah, whatever. Once again, no read on that guy. I only have threes. I think I'm gonna give up because this is not the kind of board where I'm likely to be able to make him fold a big hand if some scare cards fall. Basically, there are no possible scare cards like at all. So I'm just going to let it go. Let it go. Here he raises me on the flop, and then check on the turn. I don't expect him to be on the bluff a lot because I think he would bet the turn with bluff. I think he's going to have like some weakish made hand most of the time. I'm not representing a lot of bluffs. I'm representing missed diamonds. You could read me on that definitely. But if I check, I don't expect him to bet a lot either. I think he's going to check back most of his weakish made hands because, like I said, if he had air there or missed flush on the flop or something like that, he's definitely going to bluff the turn, I think, if he has any clue how to play. But if he doesn't have any clue on how to play, he's more likely to make a bad call on the river anyways. So I definitely prefer betting there. This is pretty tricky. I think I would have preferred a check on the flop actually, because in 4 players, first reflex is definitely to bet there for kind of protection and thin value / protection. But as soon as you get called, and it's even worse here because I'm out of position, but yeah, as soon as you get called, you're pretty much fucked and you don't have a clue what to do basically. And this is pretty much where I'm at right now. He bets pretty small on the turn. He has pretty much no queen in his range. He's likely to have a diamond draw a lot. He's gonna have queen of diamond in his range for sure. No, he bets pretty big on the river. I think this guy's a reg. I've seen the nickname around. Other than that, I pretty much don't have any read. His range there, I definitely want to look as fast as possible at his range with a small turn bet. It's going to be 9-10 suited quite a lot. He's betting pretty big on the river. I don't expect him to have king queen of diamond or something like that. I think he would bet a bit smaller with that. But he might do that because he knows that I'm not beating him very often. I just ran out of time. I might have called there, but I just ran out of time basically. Gonna go back and my hand reading process is gonna be a bit slower too when I haven't played in a while, which is definitely normal, I think. So that's why I'm gonna cut down on the number of tables just to get my groove back, like I said. So yeah, for what I think the flop bet is definitely a mistake. I just made it for no real reason, but as soon as you bet, it's not really value. You still have to protect on the turn, but any card kind of sucks and you're kind of lost. So checking would have been way better. Now I've put myself in a really bad spot, as you can see. Turn, I decided to check. I could have bet again. I think it's 2-10 and I'm way over representing my hand, and I don't really want to turn it into a bluff either, because I do want to give him the chance to try to bluff me with diamonds or 9-10 or something like that, which he's gonna have quite a lot, I think. Here with 2 checks, I'm gonna take a stab. And he bets pretty small on the turn, which makes me think that he doesn't have a monster. He's not that likely to have a 7. People just tend to bet bigger here with a 7. So it's either a draw, which is going to be a lot of that, or Queen X diamonds draw, which is, in retrospect, there are quite a lot of that as well in his range. Because he's going to call with a lot of Jack Queen, King Queen, and Ace Queen suited pre-flop in position. Queen is just a card that people tend to cold call a lot in position with, so it's a lot in his range, and he could be going for like smallish value here. So I decided to call, but it's kind of close because I will have a bad spot on the river no matter what here, even if I call the turn and I'm ahead. So turn is kind of close. I think I pretty much screwed up that hand. It might look kind of standard, but in retrospect I definitely screwed up that hand. I definitely put myself in that bad river spot by I made a mistake basically. I made a small mistake on the flop plus a small mistake on the turn, I think, but the turn is kind of a consequence of my flop mistake. So all those mistakes tend to add themselves up there, and then I'm pretty much clueless on the river. And if those kinds of situations tend to appear a lot in your game where you're on the river and you're kind of clueless and you feel like you always have no clue basically whether you should call or etc., etc., it's going to be caused a lot by previous mistakes. So you definitely want to be aware of that and try to cut the mistakes on the flop on the turn, trying to plan ahead a lot more than how I did in that hand, so you don't put yourself in those situations. I think pretty much everything is standard. I decided to raise on the flop and then bet the turn with his min bet on the flop. I just think he's going to fold pretty often. Once again, this guy is definitely not a reg, so he's just likely to suck and fold on the turn. That's pretty much my thinking process, but without any read, I can't go that far in the thinking process. I don't want to start overthinking the hand or whatever. Like, my first impression against someone who has 50 big blinds is likely to be the best one most of the time. So my first impression here was that he was pretty weak, some sort of middle pair, I don't know. So pounding on him was definitely the best idea I could find. That's something pretty important too when you're playing against unknowns like I'm doing right now. You don't want to start overthinking spots, and you definitely don't want to try to draw big conclusions out of not much evidence, because the truth is someone could make a play, a big play, big elaborated play like 3-barrel bluff or something like that, but if it's the first hand that you see of that guy like ever, chances are you don't have a clue of how he was what he was thinking about when he was making that play. So it might either be a really good player who was making a great elaborated play, or he might be just a random fish who was just clicking buttons and it ended up working well for him. So you don't want, like I said, to start overthinking and trying to get reads out of stuff that doesn't really exist, basically. You just want to keep it simple, and the more you play against someone, the more conclusions you can draw out of their more elaborated plays, and the more of their thinking process you can reconstruct in your head and make something with that. Here I don't think value betting. I think I'm going to have the best hand most of the time, of course. When he checks the river, I think flop and turn are pretty standard. Like you said, that's a really good example of what I was talking about, of not being balanced. My ace's hand, from what I've seen so far, this guy sucks. He's not reloading. He's playing 31-16. So I definitely don't give a fuck about being balanced against him. And if you go back, every time I had c-bet him in that situation so far, I had made it 5 or 6 because I had air. Now I'm just putting, basically, just because I'm valuing. It's as simple as that, but there's no way he's gonna recognize that in my head unless I run Ben and I run into a very clever dumbass, if such a thing exists. But yeah, just because I'm valuing, I want to make it bigger. I don't want to make that against someone who's going to recognize it, but this is definitely not the case here. So big turn, I think I don't have any other option but to call, because river is likely to be a pretty easy decision against that type of player. And then when he checks, like I said, I expect myself to have the best hand quite a lot, but but I'm not getting called by a worse pretty much ever, and I'm always getting called when he has better. So this is standard check back, I think. Here I decided to just dunk lead. I'm like 125 big blinds deep. I probably wouldn't call that just because he 4x's it. Probably wouldn't call if I was like 100 big blinds deep. But at that number of big blinds, I think I can call profitably, and decided to dunk lead because I do have some equity. The board is kind of scary. I could be dunk leading a lot of value hands, and no, phew, almost folded the nuts. Yeah, board is kind of scary. I do have some equity, and if he bets, I'm fucked basically. I don't have any options. So dunk leading is definitely a good idea there. Here I have flop the absolute nuts. He leads, and to me, I definitely want to raise to get the most value possible out of flush draws and king queen and jack queen. Probably gonna fire twice there. I know this guy's a rig, and I know he knows me just because he made some commentary about me making a video when I sat down. So he's likely to know that I'm aggressive and stuff. I did not notice that we were deep as fuck here. I'm definitely going to bet again, and then I'll reevaluate on the river. I'll explain later. I have a decision here. I think I want to raise and just go broke here. I think he's likely to bet 3-bet if he has a I'll come back on the two hands. The two hands simultaneously, they just ran into each other in my head, and I could not explain any of the two. So yeah, I'll come back separately. First, I'll go for it. Quick one. Fish raises, rig calls, and calls again. I did not notice that we were deep as fuck. I thought I had 100 big blinds. That's a consequence of me talking and stuff. So you definitely want to notice that. Knowing that we were deep, I might have checked the flop. Just because by betting, I do give him a very good spot with the 200 big blinds to bluff me out at some point in the hand. And since I have absolutely no info on a guy, I don't really want to play a guessing game there. So I do want to underrepresent my hand a bit more often than overrepresent it and try to guess afterwards. Here I don't even remember. I think he limped under it again and then I raised. I think I'm going to call. I think I've played against that guy at some point in the past, and if I recall correctly, he's pretty aggressive, so he might try to represent a 10 or something like that if I go ahead and call there. So I'm just going to call down and try to represent something weaker than what I actually have, and hope that he kind of bluffs or tries to represent a 10, or I don't know, he's just, I don't want to scare him if he has like 9s or something like that either. And if he has a 10 himself, I do want to give myself a chance to a river, an 8, just to be sure I have the nuts. That's what I do. He might have a flush draw. Flush draw is definitely a good part of his range, but the fact is, if I raise a flop, I'm not sure he's going broke with his flush draws. So I think I'd rather give him a chance to kind of bluff out with his flush draws. I'm not shoving the river because I wouldn't be shoving if I was bluffing with a missed flush draw. And if he has any kind of like jacks or a hand like that, I want to give him a chance to make a big fold there. Coming back on the jacks there, I think betting is kind of fine. But if I have any indication that the guy might pull out a big bluff on me at some point in that hand, I would rather check the flop. But I'm still pretty comfortable with betting there. And he calls, pretty standard. The turn here, I think, is a spot where this is definitely the spot once that I've played the hand the way I've approached it so far by betting the flop as deep as we are, 3-betting pre-flop, betting the flop. I want to keep the guy as straightforward as possible in his decisions. And if I bet small here, I might give him a chance to once again try a bluff or try to represent pocket tens, which he could have a lot, pocket 7, 3s, or deuces, obviously. And I think here, if I bet pretty big, he's not likely to try to make me fold anything if I go bigger. And since I don't think I'm ever going to have any value, turn plus river without much historic here, even if the river is a brick, if he has something like 8s or 9s, which he's going to have pretty often too, I don't think like betting half pot and half pot will have any merits other than opening the door for some kind of shove on the river, which would suck for me to face. So I decided to go a bit bigger on the turn and then probably check the river and hope that he plays the river pretty straightforward himself, because if he calls the turn again, he might call the turn again with like 8s, 9s, 4s, or 5s, or 6s. And if I check the river on a brick, he's definitely going to check back those. I think, since I bet pretty big on the turn, I think he's going to think that I'm pretty polarized there. So this is kind of elaborated, and all those details might not even run into his head for what it's worth, but I still want to put all the chances on my side there, not to put myself once again in the pretty bad river spot. I don't want to open the door for him to be able to pull out a big play on me and give me a hard time on the river, like the ace 8 hand that I kind of didn't think about all that and kind of botched up, even though it didn't feel that way. I ended up having a hard time making a decision on the river because of previous decisions that I had made, and I wanted to make sure that this river decision would be as simple as possible, basically. I get 3-bet with the 9s. This is an obvious call. I could start bluffing here, but I think it's going to check like aces without a heart or a lot of stuff like that pretty often on that board with that stack deepness. He's definitely a reg. I have known that he, as soon as the session started, he kind of 4-bet go broke with his jack suited into my ace king cutoff versus button, which in my head is definitely a mistake. But that leads me to believe that he knows who I am, and he's likely to, even if he might do some mistakes, he's likely to be thinking when he plays, and he's not like going to bet there just for betting purposes on the flop, basically. This is kind of weird for what it's worth, because I expect him to bet pretty much every single time if he has the ace of hearts on the flop, because it's going to be ace X of hearts with a combo pretty much every time, and betting is definitely the right play with those type of stack deepness, but I could be wrong. And on river, I really don't see what he could have. He might have actually ace jack with the ace of hearts, or that kind of ace of hearts with some showdown value. I don't see him having like a random low heart. I think he would check all those, but the problem is he could definitely be turning better made hands into a bluff, and I definitely can't represent the ace of hearts there, so raising is kind of out of the question. So if I had something like ace jack myself, I might have made that river call. Maybe ace queen, not ace jack. But now you could turn a random jack into a bluff, definitely. So I can't really raise and I can't really call either. So that definitely sucks. I'm gonna cut down on the tricky situation that I was talking before with those jacks here. That's kind of big, but I did not have any time left. I would have bet smaller if I had something more like 24. And I'm seriously hitting everything. That makes me sick because I do want to talk about much closer decisions, but I keep hitting the nuts on the river, so it makes it pretty easy. Here I want to value pretty big because he might have a flush quite often, and he might call with like just 8. I definitely wanted to call those jacks. I just ran out of time, and he ended up, he flopped the full house. This is definitely a joke, and I perfect runner game. Sorry guys for running that good. This is ridiculous. And now he's berating me. Okay, no, he's berating himself. That's pretty cool. Even though he doesn't have much reason to. I think slow playing against me, even though he probably doesn't know it was the right play. I was definitely going to barrel that on a lot of scare cards. And yeah, I did have another hand that I wanted to talk about. Against Zomagon Ruffle. Colonel Gill, I don't have a clue who he is. Fuck him. On the flop, he's leading into me, and I expect him to be leading kind of weakish pretty often, just because I don't have a clue basically what's his leading range. I haven't played enough against him, but knowing that he knows me, and I'm seeing so far that he's playing 21-12, he's likely to have a lot of king queens and jack queens in his range pre-flop. He's not likely to call that wide, just because it looks like he's playing pretty tight. I'm gonna give up. And he could have a bluff, but I don't expect him to like run a big bluff on me there. He might be, he knows who I am, so he might kind of not be so confident against me. So he's not that likely, like I said, to run a super big bluff. So I decided to raise because I think he has a piece of the board more often than not. And he calls. And turn it is the 10 of spades. And he leads again. And I definitely expect him at that point to have, once again, something like King Queen or Jack Queen. I don't think he's calling Queen 10. He might be calling Queen 10 pre-flop. And the more I think about it, the less I love my turn raise, to be honest. My first instinct was that I was good pretty much always, most of the time, so I wanted to maximize my value there. And even if I'm not good, I do have a pretty good redraw. But the problem is I might scare him off some hands here. But I did make it small enough so he at least has to call with King Queen, given that the board is so dry. I might have check raised here and tried to pull a big bluff, but being myself, I'm kind of reluctant to do that. I tend to get called on a lot more. But if you don't have the image of someone who is going to pull out a big bluff in that situation, this is like the perfect board and the perfect stack deepness to just check raise big and pound the turn and then like shove the river and have him fold biggest part of his range most of the time against someone normal. But yeah, I think coming back on the ace queen there, this is definitely a close decision on the turn. And I felt like I made it small enough so that if he has some kind of combo draw, I just have a really hard time putting him on anything else than king queen, to be honest, when he leads 2 times into me, just like that. And I didn't think he would fold king queen if I raised there. but he did fold. He might have turned some kind of draw to some kind of combo draw, and I felt like he would definitely go broke with those. I would need a bit more info on the guy's ranges to make the best decision there. Here I'm going to 2-barrel and make my second barrel pretty big, and then give up on the river. I think he's check calling ace X low and any pocket between 9 and aces. On the flop, most of the time when he's check calling, likely to have that range. And I don't want a 3-barrel because he's calling down with aces, and I do want to 2-barrel. With all of his ace X, he's calling down, and I think he's likely to fold. Once again, this is kind of out of nowhere as a read, but normal people tend to play like that, like 15-10 people at NL200 tend to play that way. He is likely to check fold the turn with his medium pocket, so I decided to go for 2 barrels. Now I'm getting 4-bet from everywhere. It's like since I've started playing, this is kind of weird. I should just calm down on 3 bets, I think. That's what I would say if I wasn't dumb. Sorry, I dropped an almond on the floor. Those are delicious almonds. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Almonds, but the like oval shaped nuts, those are good. This is the end of part 1, so please come back for part 2.